franchi l'océan et débarqué sur les côtes de France il y a 8 décennies de cela. Vous avez tout quitté et pris tous les risques pour notre indépendance, pour notre liberté. Cela, nous ne l'oublions pas. Merci. Vous êtes venu ici et vous avez rejoint notre guerre pour y faire basculer l'histoire. Oui. Vous êtes venu ici, Mr. Hilbert Margol, débarqué à Marseille en janvier 1945, remontant l'Europe de la Provence à la Pologne, jusqu'à ce jour dramatique où, avec votre frère jumeau Howard, vous avez découvert les charniers de Dachau. Vous êtes venu ici, Mr. John Wardle, fantassin auquel votre courage a valu une blessure à Hürtgenwald, en Allemagne, en pleine bataille. Vous êtes venu ici, Mr. Robert Pedigo, pour combattre avec votre escadrille de Saint-Laurent à l'Allemagne. Vous êtes venu ici, Monsieur Calvin Scheiner, qui avait participé à l'opération Dragoon depuis le sud de la France et passé les derniers mois de guerre à réparer nos hôpitaux, nos voies ferrées, nos routes. Vous êtes venu ici, Monsieur Edward Berthold, devenu avec vos 35 missions de combat un véritable fléau des nazis, dont vous bombardiez inlassablement les centres névralgiques, tout comme Edwin Cottrell, pour qui j'ai une pensée aujourd'hui et qui aurait dû être des vôtres. Vous êtes venu ici, Monsieur Dominic Critelli, pour libérer le continent où vous étiez né. Et vous, Mr. Bill Casassa, avec cette force d'âme exceptionnelle qui vous a permis de tenir 171 jours de combat continu face à l'ennemi. Vous êtes venu, Mr. Victor Chaney, débarqué en juillet sur la plage d'Utah Beach pour libérer la Normandie, puis Angers, puis Reims. Vous êtes venu ici, Mr. Raymond Glansberg, vous, l'enfant du Bronx, combattant le long de la Moselle et des Vosges. Et vous, Mr. Richard Stewart, pour faire passer nos messages à travers les frontières de la France, la Belgique, l'Allemagne. Vous êtes venu ici, Mr. John Kenyon, qui avait vécu la Normandie, la libération de Paris, le Maroc, évacuant nos blessés, transportant nos hommes et notre matériel. Vous êtes venu ici. Le monde libre avait besoin de chacun de vous et vous avez répondu présent, comme vos frères d'armes, encore vivants, comme vos frères d'armes alors tombés. Here you came to join your efforts with our own soldiers and to make France a free nation. And you are back here today, at home, if I may say. Rangers, lead the way. Telle fut l'exclamation de Norman Cotta, sous le feu de la mitraille à ses hommes, sous la pluie d'obus. Vous êtes venus ici. Alors vous voilà à jamais chez vous, sur le sol de France, et nous n'oublions pas. À vous, hommes de la Great Generation, de nous enseigner à notre tour à être grands, à lutter pour la paix et la liberté du monde. À nos côtés, vous avez fait cette guerre et nous l'avons gagnée. Alors pour vous qui êtes là, et pour vos camarades qui ne le sont plus, et dont vous portez la mémoire en ce jour, pour votre bravoure au service de notre liberté. J'ai l'honneur de vous remettre les insignes de chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Merci.
Distinguished guests, the President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron, will now present the National Order of the Legion of Honor. Established in 1802 by Napoleon Bonaparte, the Legion of Honor is France's highest decoration and recognizes eminent services to the French Republic. This distinguished award to these American veterans acknowledges their service and participation in the liberation of France during the Second World War.
Chers invités, le président de la République française, Emmanuel Macron, va maintenant présenter l'Ordre national de la Légion d'honneur. Créée en 1802 par Napoléon Bonaparte, la Légion d'honneur est la plus haute décoration française et récompense les services éminents rendus à la République française. Cette distinction décernée à ces vétérans américains reconnaît leur service et leur participation à la libération de la France pendant la Seconde Guerre mondiale.
Monsieur Hilbert Margol, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Monsieur John Wardle, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. He wants to say it. He wants to stand. Monsieur Robert Péligot, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Monsieur Calvin China, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Monsieur Edward Berthold, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Monsieur Dominique Critelli, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Monsieur Bill Cassassa, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Monsieur Victor Chani, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Monsieur Raymond Glanzberg, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Monsieur Richard Stewart, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Monsieur John Kenyon, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur.
Distinguished guests, please welcome the Honorable Lloyd J. Austin III, Secretary of Defense of the United States of America.
Chers invités, veuillez accueillir l'honorable Lloyd J. Austin, troisième du nom, secrétaire à la Défense des États-Unis d'Amérique.
President Biden, Dr. Biden, President Macron, Mrs. Macron, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and above all, the veterans of World War II. I am honored to stand again at this hallowed place. We bow our heads to remember the more than 9,000 U.S. and Allied soldiers killed or wounded on D-Day by Hitler's forces. On behalf of the United States Department of Defense, I am here to give thanks, inadequate as that word may be. 80 years later, we thank the young Americans who took the beaches, who helped liberate France, and who helped free this continent from Nazi tyranny. We thank every Allied warrior who fought for freedom on June 6, 1944. And we thank the American and Allied veterans who have rallied once more on the shores of Normandy. Victors of D-Day, we are humbled by your presence. The young Americans who fought through the clamor and the chaos on D-Day have grown old or left us. And whenever a veteran of D-Day is gathered to his maker, in the fullness of time, after a long life lived in freedom, he wins a final victory over Hitler. You helped defeat what Churchill called a monstrous tyranny never surpassed in the dark, lamentable catalog of human crime. And you laid the foundation for a more just, free, and decent world. Together with our allies, we built peace out of war, a hard-headed peace, a peace renewed by constant commitment, a peace forged by the generation that won the bloodiest war in human history. And so our gratitude must never fade. Our memories must never dim, and our resolve must never fail. We still seek a world where aggression is a sin, and where human rights are sacred, and where all people can live in freedom. And so we must rally again to defend the open, post-war world of rules, rights, and responsibilities. Those rules protect us. Those rights define us. And those responsibilities summon us once more. At this hinge in history, we must again stand firm against aggression and tyranny. And as I said here last year, if the troops of the world's democracies could risk their lives for freedom then, surely the citizens of the world's democracy can risk our comfort for freedom now. So let us again uphold the spirit of D-Day. Let us again defend the principles that the Allied armies carried. And let us again thank the heroes of D-Day who kept freedom alive for us all. You saved the world. You saved the world, and we must only defend it. Gentlemen, we salute you. May God bless the American and Allied troops who fought here. May God bless the United States of America, and may God bless all who cherish human freedom. Thank you.
Papa, what was it like on D-Day?
We had no idea what we were going to do or where it would happen, but it was the beginning.
It was a very decisive battle for us because our mission was to establish ourselves on the beach.
When we were on that boat, on that Higgins boat, everybody talked about the same thing, helping each other and not getting killed.
We started up this sandy area, and we're hundreds of men in sight.
My father jumped about 1:30 in the morning on June 6th. The plane was too low, it was too fast, the fire coming up was so thick, it was like you could walk on it.
It wasn't something that we had ever seen before in all of our training.
I always have said that it was the power of my mother's prayers that saved me that day.
And it gets to me thinking about it. But as I look over those crosses, I see people standing up, even waving. I have to go back because there's something there that draws you back.
I have a very close friend that I knew by the name of Edward Mirosevich. He had received a very bad stomach wound, and I could not even bandage it properly. We said goodbye to each other wherever. He's laying here on the cemetery here in Colville. I think of the many men here that paid the ultimate price for the freedom of Europe.
Young people want to know and need to know. Everybody I saw that I was glad to fight alongside them, they were willing to stand up. And not all of them came back.
And they all have a story to tell. And it's our responsibility to tell those stories. People will not be forgotten as long as we keep talking about them.
I am not a hero, I just did my job. The real heroes are laying here on the cemeteries. These are our heroes, and we should never forget them.
Distinguished guests, the 46th President of the United States of America, Joseph R. Biden, Jr.
Invité d'honneur, le 46e président des États-Unis d'Amérique, Joseph R. Biden, Jr.
The hour had nearly come. Monday, June 5th, 1944. The evil of Hitler's Third Reich was devastating the world. Nazi Germany had subjugated the once free nations of Europe through brute force, lies, and twisted ideology of racial superiority. Millions of Jews murdered in the Holocaust. Millions of others killed by bombs, bullets, bloody warfare. Hitler and those with him thought democracies were weak, that the future belonged to dictators. Here, on the coast of Normandy, the battle between freedom and tyranny would be joined. Here, on that June morning, the testing was at hand. President Macron, Mrs. Macron, Secretary Austin, Secretary Blinken, distinguished guests, most of all, our honored veterans who met that test at the ages, a test of ages to that moment, 80 years ago today. On behalf of the American people, and as Commander-in-Chief, it's the highest honor to be able to salute you here in Normandy once more. All of you, God love you. Winston Churchill called what happened here, quote, the greatest, most complicated operation ever, end of quote. After years of planning, Operation Overlord was ready to launch just as soon as the weather turned. Across the choppy English Channel, the Supreme Commander of the Allies, Dwight D. Eisenhower, waited. The largest force ever of its kind, built by 12 nations. Men, guns, planes, naval craft of every description waited. The world, captive and free, waited. Finally, Eisenhower's forecaster said there was a window in the weather. It would open briefly on Tuesday, the 6th of June. The general weighed the options and gave the order. At dawn, the Allies would strike. The great crusade to free Europe from tyranny would begin. That night, General Eisenhower drove to the English town of Newbury to visit paratroopers of the 101st Airborne. There were men from all over America. It was estimated that 80% of them would be killed within hours. That was the estimate. But they were brave, they were resolute, and they were ready. One soldier told General Eisenhower, quote, "Don't worry, sir. The 101st is on the job. Everything will be taken care of." That's what he said. And because of their courage and their resolve, because the courage and resolve of their allies, it was taken care of. From the sea and sky, nearly 160,000 Allied troops descended on Normandy. Many, to state the obvious, never came home. Many survived that longest day, kept on fighting for months until victory was finally won. And a few, a notable band of brothers, are here with us today. Kenneth Blaine Smith is here. On that day, under heavy artillery fire, he operated a rangefinder and radar on the first American ship to arrive at Normandy's coast, providing direct gunfire support for the Rangers scaling the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc on their daring mission to take out the German batteries. Bob Gibson is here. He landed on Utah Beach about 10 hours after the invasion began. Bullets flying everywhere, tracers lighting up the sky. Bob drove an M4 tractor with anti-aircraft gun mounted on top, providing critical protection for the infantry against the German Air Force. On that day, and for many days after, he continued. Ben Miller is here, a medic with the 82nd Airborne. At 3 a.m. on June 6th, he and 13 other medics flew over the channel in a rickety glider. Its wings were ripped off by giant poles that the Germans buried halfway in the ground to stop them from landing. They crashed, but they survived. And they did their duty, dragging injured soldiers to safety, treating wounds, saving lives while the battle raged. Every soldier who stormed the beach, who dropped by parachute or landed by glider, every sailor who manned the thousands of ships and landing craft, every aviator who destroyed German-controlled airfields, bridges, and railroads, all were backed by other brave Americans, including hundreds of thousands of people of color and women who courageously served despite unjust limitations on what they could do for their nation. Lewis Brown is here, part of the Red Ball Express, a truck convoy made up of mostly African-American drivers. They landed in Normandy in the wake of D-Day. They rushed supplies to the rapidly advancing front lines. Woody Woodhouse is here, members of the legendary Tuskegee Airmen, who flew over 15,000 sorties during the war. Marjorie Stone is here. She enlisted in the women's branch of the Naval Reserve, became an aircraft mechanic, spent the war keeping American planes and pilots in the air. Theirs has always been the story of America. Just walk the rows of this cemetery as I have. Nearly 10,000 heroes buried side by side, officers and enlisted, immigrants and native-born, different races, different faiths, but all Americans. All served with honor when America and the world needed them most. Millions back home did their part as well. From coast to coast, Americans found countless ways to pitch in. They understood our democracy is only as strong as all of us make it together. The men who fought here became heroes, not because they were the strongest or toughest or fiercest, although they were, but because they were given an audacious mission, knowing, every one of them knew, the probability of dying was real. But they did it anyway. They knew, beyond any doubt, there are things that are worth fighting and dying for. Freedom is worth it. Democracy is worth it. America is worth it. The world is worth it. Then, now, and always. The war in Europe didn't end for another 11 months. But here, the tide turned in our favor. Here, we proved the forces of liberty are stronger than the forces of conquest. Here, we proved that the ideals of our democracy are stronger than any army or combination of armies in the entire world. We proved something else here as well, the unbreakable unity of the Allies. Here with us are men who served alongside the Americans that day, wearing different flags on their arms, but fighting with the same courage for the same purpose. What the Allies did together 80 years ago far surpassed anything we could have done on our own. It was a powerful illustration of how alliances, real alliances, make us stronger. A lesson that I pray we Americans never forget. Together we won the war. We rebuilt Europe, including our former enemies. It was an investment in what became shared and a prosperous future. We established NATO, the greatest military alliance in the history of the world. And over time, you got it, it is. And over time, we brought more nations into NATO, the NATO alliance, including the newest members, Finland and Sweden. Today, NATO stands at 32 countries strong, and NATO is more united than ever, and even more prepared to keep the peace, deter aggression, defend freedom all around the world. America has invested in our alliances and forged new ones, not simply out of altruism, but out of our own self-interest as well. America's unique ability to bring countries together is an undeniable source of our strength and our power. Isolationism was not the answer 80 years ago and is not the answer today. We know the dark forces that these heroes fought against 80 years ago. They never fade. Aggression and greed, the desire to dominate and control, to change borders by force, these are perennial. The struggle between a dictatorship and freedom is unending. Here in Europe, we see one stark example. Ukraine has been invaded by a tyrant bent on domination. Ukrainians are fighting with extraordinary courage, suffering great losses, but never backing down. They've been inflicted on the Russian aggressors. They've suffered tremendous losses in Russia. The numbers are staggering. 350,000 Russian troops dead or wounded. Nearly 1 million people have left Russia because they can no longer see a future in Russia. The United States and NATO and a coalition of more than 50 countries standing strong with Ukraine. We will not walk away. Because if we do, Ukraine will be subjugated, and it will not end there. Ukraine's neighbors will be threatened. All of Europe will be threatened. And make no mistake, the autocrats of the world are watching closely to see what happens in Ukraine, to see if we let this illegal aggression go unchecked. We cannot let that happen. To surrender to bullies, to bow down to dictators, is simply unthinkable. Were we to do that, it means we'd be forgetting what happened here in these hallowed beaches. Make no mistake, we will not bow down. We will not forget. Let me end with this. History tells us freedom is not free. If you want to know the price of freedom, come here to Normandy. Come to Normandy and look. Go to the other cemeteries in Europe where our fallen heroes rest. Go back home to Arlington Cemetery. Tomorrow, I will pay respects at Pointe du Hoc. Go there as well and remember, the price of unchecked tyranny is the blood of the young and the brave. In their generation, in their hour of trial, the Allied forces of D-Day did their duty. Now the question for us is, in our hour of trial, will we do ours? We're living in a time when democracy is more at risk across the world than any point since the end of World War II, since these beaches were stormed in 1944. Now we have to ask ourselves, will we stand against tyranny, against evil, against crushing brutality of the iron fist? Will we stand for freedom? Will we defend democracy? Will we stand together? My answer is yes, and only can be yes. We're not far off from the time when the last living voices of those who fought and bled on D-Day will no longer be with us. So we have a special obligation. We cannot let what happened here be lost in the silence of the years to come. We must remember it, must honor it, and live it. And we must remember the fact that they were heroes here that day does not absolve us from what we have to do today. Democracy is never guaranteed. Every generation must preserve it, defend it, and fight for it. That's the test of the ages. In memory of those who fought here, died here, literally saved the world here, let us be worthy of their sacrifice. Let us be the generation that when history is written about our time, in 10, 20, 30, 50, 80 years from now, it'll be said, When the moment came, we met the moment. We stood strong. Our alliances were made stronger. We saved democracy in our time as well. Thank you very much, and may God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, in honor of the veterans gathered with us today and those commemorated at this hallowed ground, Lieutenant Commander Catherine Miyamasu will now read the watch.
Chers invités, en l'honneur des vétérans réunis avec nous aujourd'hui et de ceux qui sont commémorés dans ce lieu sacré, la capitaine de corvette Catherine Miyamasu va maintenant lire The Watch, la garde.
Detail! Attention! Center! Face!
When a sailor retires, it is traditional that a younger service member read the watch. Today, we want to read the watch for all World War II veterans here today, both behind us and all around us. 80 years ago, these sailors stood the watch. While some of us were in our bunks at night, these soldiers stood the watch. While some of us were in school learning our trade, Marines, airmen, and coasties stood the watch. Yes, even before some of us were born into this world. The men behind me and their brothers and sisters who lay before me stood the watch. In those years, when the storm clouds of war were seen brewing on the horizon of history, they stood the watch. Many times, they would cast an eye ashore and see family standing there, needing guidance and help, needing that hand to hold in those hard times. But still, they stood the watch. They stood the watch 80 years ago. They stood the watch so that we, our families, and our fellow countrymen and women can sleep soundly in safety each and every night, knowing that these veterans stood the watch. Today, we are here to say, World War II veterans, the watch stands relieved. Relieved by those you have trained, guided, and led. American World War II veterans, you stand relieved. We have the watch.
Present! Arms!
Distinguished guests, please rise if you are able, as we salute those memorialized here at Normandy American Cemetery, and remain standing for the playing of La Sonnerie au Mort and Taps, and the departure of the official party.
Chers invités, veuillez vous lever si vous le pouvez pour saluer ceux qui sont commémorés ici au cimetière américain de Normandie et rester debout pour l'interprétation de la sonnerie aux morts et de TAPS et pour le départ de la délégation officielle.
Distinguished guests, please be seated. Announcements will begin shortly to dismiss guests to the shuttle areas. Please listen closely for further announcements. Watch your nearest screen for additional information and follow staff guidance to the exits.
Chers invités, veuillez vous asseoir. Des annonces seront faites sous peu pour guider les invités vers les zones de navette. Veuillez écouter attentivement les annonces ultérieures, surveillez l'écran le plus proche pour obtenir des informations supplémentaires et suivez les indications du personnel vers les sorties.
Distinguished guests, please be seated. Announcements will begin shortly to dismiss guests to the shuttle areas. Please listen closely for further announcements. Watch your nearest screen for additional information and follow staff guidance to the exits.
Chers invités, veuillez vous asseoir. Des annonces seront faites sous peu pour guider les invités vers les zones de navette. Veuillez écouter attentivement les annonces ultérieures, surveillez l'écran le plus proche pour obtenir des informations supplémentaires et suivez les indications du personnel vers les sorties.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, ticket holders for the international ceremony only, please move to the parking area as quickly as possible for immediate transfer to Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer. Credentialed media for the international ceremony may now also return to the Media Operations Center parking area for transfer.
Mesdames et messieurs, nous invitons les détenteurs de billets pour la cérémonie internationale uniquement à se rendre au parking le plus rapidement possible afin de pouvoir rejoindre Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer. Les médias accrédités pour la cérémonie internationale peuvent désormais retourner au parking du Media Operations Center afin d'être transférés.